guys, welcome back to another episode of Codergirl.py. My name is Serenity, aka Codergirl. This is my friend Scooter, and today I'm going to introduce you to arrays using Python. Hope you enjoy! Alright, so if I open up my IDE, you'll notice I have one new folder, array. In my array folder, I have three new files, array.py, array1.py, and noarray.py. Let's open up noarray.py first. In noarray.py, we're pretending to be teachers, recording the scores of our students from their last test. At the moment, in order to do that, we have to store each score in a variable. And you can see we've done just that. We have 10 variables storing the scores of all of our students. Student 1, Student 2, Student 3, and so on. Then we print out the score of the third student, which is Student 3. And if you run this program, you can see it outputs 89, just like expected. And there's nothing really wrong with this program. It stores all of our scores, and it prints out the score of student 3. That is all fine. But we only have 10 students, so making a separate variable for each student works just fine in a program like this. However, what if we have 20, 50, or 100 students? We'd have to make a variable for each student, which will make our program long and complicated. Luckily, arrays are a great way to get around this problem. So let's exit out of noarray.py and head into array.py. In array.py, we have a lot of new material, so let's go through it line by line. An array is basically like a list. It's an efficient way to store lots of information. Instead of having to make one new variable for each piece of information, you can just make one array that stores all of that information. You can think of it like this. Each variable is a tiny box that we put information in. It's tiny and easy to use. But if we have dozens of pieces of information, that means dozens of tiny boxes, and it's going to cause a lot of clutter. An array is like a big box that we can store a lot of information in. Instead of needing 20 tiny boxes to store 20 pieces of information, we can only use one big box to store 20 pieces of information. It will reduce clutter and make our programs easier. To make an array, you'll need array name equals open bracket information closing bracket. Like a variable, each array needs a unique name, so you can't name two arrays the same thing. In an array, you'll need to separate each piece of information by a comma. Take a look at the first array in array.py. It's called myArray, and it stores 3 pieces of information, 1, 2, and 3. We've separated each piece of information by a comma. Note that the first and last pieces of information do not need a comma. One thing you'll notice is that I'm storing just integers in this array. However, I can store whatever type of information I want. Strings, booleans, integers, floats, even other arrays. However, to keep it simple, I'm just storing integers. And one last thing to note is that in my array, I'm only storing 3 pieces of information, 1, 2, and 3. However, in an array, you can store as many pieces of information as you want. However, to keep it simple, I am just storing 3 pieces of information. So, as you can already see, arrays are extremely useful. Instead of having to make 3 separate variables to store our 3 pieces of information, 1, 2, and 3, we just use one array, or one big box, to store all of that information. However, how do we actually access these pieces of information? We can access the pieces of information by using indices. Each item in an array is given an index or a number. We then use that index to call on that number to get the value. So in array.py, you'll see that I declare another array called this array. I've given it 3 pieces of information, or in this case, 3 integers, 4, 5, and 6. Again, I'm just storing integers to keep it simple, and I'm only storing 3 pieces of information to also keep it simple. Take a close look at the comment under this array. It shows the indices for each of the items. These indices are going off of zero-based indexing, which means that no matter what array you're using, the index for the first item is always 0. So the second item would be 1, the third item would be 2, and so on. The exact reasons for why indices start at 0 can be complicated, but I'll have a link down in the description if you want to find out why. For right now, it's just a point to know that when you're going off of zero-based indexing, the indices always start at 0. So let's look back at this array, which has 3 items. Since we're going to use zero-based indexing, our indices will start at 0. This means that our first item, the integer 4, will have an index of 0. Our second item will have an index of 1. Our third item will have an index of 2. If we had more items in our array, the indices would go on, 3, 4, 5, etc. However, we're only using 3 pieces of information in our array, so our indices are just 0, 1, and 2. To actually access an item in the array, you'll need array name, open bracket, index, closing bracket. This would return or hand you the item at that index. So let's say I wanted to access and print the first item of this array. The first item is at index 0, so I'd write this array, open bracket, 0, closing bracket. This would return or hand back the integer 4, since the integer 4 is at the index 0. And to print this, I just have to write it in a print statement. And you can see I've done all of this in array.py. If I run this program by clicking the run button, you can see it prints out 4, since again, 4 is the item at index 0. Perfect. Now let's apply what we know about arrays to a real-world example. Let's close array.py and open up array1.py. Just like noArray.py and array1.py, we're pretending that we're teachers, storing the scores from our students' last test. However, unlike noArray.py and array1.py, we now know how to use arrays. So we're able to use an array, or just one array, instead of 10 variables. Then we print out the score of the third student by using zero-based indexing. By using an array, we've made our program efficient and easy. And this is all perfect. However, there's something new in array1.py that I didn't mention: negative indices. We've already covered zero-based indexing, which is where the first item of the array is at index 0. However, in array1.py, you can see I've listed the negative indices for this array. For negative indices, the last item in the array is -1. The second to last item in the array has an index of -2. The third to last item in the array has an index of -3, and so on. They work very similarly to zero-based indexing and can be used to access items in the array the exact same way. After we declare the array test results, as you can see, we print out the results of student 3. You can see we first printed out using the index 2 and then using the index -8. Since the results of student 3 are both at index 2 and index -8, these two ways of calling them, test results 2 and test results -8, both print out student 3's score, which is 89. And if we run this program, you can see we get 89 just as expected. Perfect. As you can see, arrays are very useful. They can store tons of different kinds of information and help make your programs easier and more efficient. There's a lot more stuff you can do with arrays, but I'll cover those in a later video once we have a better idea what's going on. For now, practice using arrays in different programs. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe, and I will catch you guys later. This is Codergirl.py signing out.